Redditors, I have never done this. I was trying to let out all the feelings that I had been going through lately. I came across this page and felt like pouring my heart here. My name is Travis and I am 32 years old. I am here to share my story about how my marriage ended. I had been married to Lauren. She was 5 years younger than I was. I loved her way too much and let her live her life the way she wanted until she did something that was highly unacceptable. Even though I was unwilling, I had to make sure that she never repeats the same mistake ever in her life. She did an unforgivable deed that had to be punished. It was a difficult decision, but I knew that allowing her to continue without consequences would only enable her behavior. Despite the pain it caused me, I knew that cheating was something that was unacceptable in any relationship. I caught my wife lying and cheating, so I took my revenge to make sure that she suffers the consequences of her actions. I met Lauren 9 months ago at one of my friends' party. I was instantly smitten by her beauty and wanted to get to know her better. I asked my friend to introduce me to her so that I could start a conversation with her. My friend introduced us and left us to talk. She was quite easygoing and our conversation flowed very smoothly. She told me that she enjoyed going to parties and living her life on her own terms. She was ready for any challenge thrown her way. After talking to her, I liked her even more than before. She was not only beautiful, but also very clear about what she wanted in life. I decided that I would want to meet her more to get to know her. We started meeting each other and it made me realize that I could not stop thinking about her. She made me feel like no one ever did. I had been warned by my friends about her wild nature and constant changing of boyfriends, but I paid no heed. I trusted my instinct and knew that she too felt the same way about me. It was just 6 months since I knew Lauren, but somewhere in my heart, I was very sure that she was the one I wanted to marry. I took her out for a holiday to a private island. She was impressed by the elaborate preparations that I had arranged just for her. One evening, as we were having drinks at sunset, I popped the question when I felt that it was the perfect moment. She instantly agreed and said yes. She gave me a hug and started crying, telling me that this was the best day of her life so far. We had a royal wedding and were the talk of the town for almost a month. Everybody talked about our wedding wherever we went. The media coverage of our wedding was overwhelming, with news outlets and social media platforms buzzing about our fairy tale romance. People were captivated by the love story we shared, and it seemed like everyone wanted to be a part of our joyous celebration. Even strangers would approach us to congratulate and share their well wishes, making us feel incredibly blessed and grateful for the outpouring of love and support. On the day of the wedding, both Lauren and I decided to still use 2 separate rooms to keep our stuff. We would sleep together at night but have a separate life of our own. I knew that we had taken very little time getting to know each other before we got married, so we both mutually decided to live our lives the same way that we did before we got married, until we could find a rhythm in our lives to give space to each other. We understood the importance of maintaining our individuality and personal interests, even within the confines of marriage. By giving each other space and time to pursue our own hobbies and goals, we believed it would strengthen our bond and allow us to grow both as individuals and as a couple. We hardly interfered with each other's schedules and did not always keep tabs on each other. I was mostly busy with my business, and adding one extra thing to my routine would be a hassle. I trusted that Lauren would make sure to take care of herself and let me know if she needed anything. This level of trust and independence in our relationship allowed us to support each other's personal growth and maintain a healthy balance between our individual lives and our life together. It also created a sense of freedom and autonomy, fostering a deep sense of respect and admiration for one another. We understood that by prioritizing our own well-being, we were ultimately contributing to the strength and happiness of our marriage. Lauren wanted to celebrate her marriage to me with her friends, so I organized a cruise for 5 days with 5 of her best friends. I did not find the need to join them, as it would only make them awkward. I had no issue in agreeing to anything my wife wished for as long as I could afford it, as all I cared about was her happiness. I believed that giving her the space to enjoy this special time with her friends would make the experience even more memorable for her. Plus, I trusted that she would have a wonderful time and create lasting memories with her closest friends. Lauren continued living the same way that she did even after we got married, going to parties, coming home super drunk, and going to bed. I made her sit one evening and asked her if there was something bothering her to behave this way. She said that all this was too new for her, and it would take her some time to adjust to this new life. She told me that she was not born with a silver spoon like I was, so all this was very overwhelming for her. I tried to understand what she meant and decided to give her some more time to step into the shoes of a wealthy man's wife. It has been almost 3 months since we got married. Lauren still did not come around and maintained her separate room. She would shower me with love, and we would have passionate nights together. But there was something that still felt missing in our relationship. Despite the physical intimacy and affection we shared, there was a lingering emotional distance between us. I couldn't help but wonder if there were deeper issues at play, causing Lauren to keep her guard up and maintain her separate space. I wanted her to trust me completely and make her feel as comfortable as possible, as this was her home, and this is where she belonged. I was contemplating if I should have a conversation with Lauren about my unhappiness and my concerns regarding our relationship. Would she take it in good spirits and try to see where I am coming from? I decided to give it a week's time and then maybe sit with her and have a heart-to-heart conversation about our feelings and if we were on the same page. I decided that this would be the best approach where nobody would be hurt. I came home early one day to grab a few papers for an upcoming meeting. I noticed that Lauren was not at home. Probably she was out with her friends. I was about to grab my papers from my room and leave when I decided to check what Lauren's room looked like. Maybe I could find some clues there that would help me to understand her better. I started looking around for either a diary or a journal that she kept. As I was shuffling through the papers, one of her lipsticks fell on the ground. I bent down to pick it up and noticed a paper under the dresser. It must be something important, so I tried to pull it out. It was an invitation to a private party. I opened to look into more details about it. I could see that the party was in honor of Lauren, organized by a group of men. The bottom of the invite was something that grabbed my attention. It read, "To the most beautiful woman ever, who deserves the love of every man in the world." I looked at the address of the party. It was a private villa owned by one of my business competitors. I decided to go and see for myself what this party was all about. On my way to the party, I called Lauren to check where she was. She told me that she was having a sleepover at one of her friends' houses and would be coming home by tomorrow evening. Lauren had no reason to lie to me because I had given her all the freedom in the world to do what she pleased. I trusted Lauren not to lie to me and just wanted reassurance that she was not at the party. I was sure that there was something fishy going on at this party that I had to find out. I reached the destination and parked my car outside. I could see that there was no one at the gate, so I showed myself inside. As I walked inside, I could hear loud and cheerful music that was deafening to the ears. I could see a lot of cars parked along the path leading to the villa. Right at the entrance, I saw Lauren's car parked, which meant she was definitely at the party and not at her friend's house as she claimed. I walked to the front door but decided against ringing the bell. I started walking along the wall to see if there was any window that I could peep through. I walked a little further and noticed one of the windows with its blinds open. I carefully tried to look carefully so as not to get caught. I could see a bunch of men standing with drinks and laughing. The music was too loud for me to make out what they were laughing at. I was so engrossed in trying to find out what was happening that I didn't even notice the obvious. Most of the men were missing a lot of clothing on their bodies. Some of them were bare-chested, while a few were just in their inner wear. They were all looking at the same thing that was below them. It was too low for me to look at what it was. I could not understand what Lauren could be doing at such a party. I was trying to give up and ring the doorbell when I saw something rising from the ground. It was Lauren standing right in the middle of all the men, with her 2 hands on her breasts and wearing only her panties. I was left numb. I could not feel anything. Just before I thought that this could be the worst thing I had seen today, one of the men came and kissed Lauren. She looked at everyone and laughed as they started hooting. I was filled with rage and anger. I decided to barge in and take Lauren away. I started walking briskly towards the main door when I got an idea. I walked back to the window and started to make a note of everyone present at the party. There were 6 men, and of course, Lauren. I was both angry and frustrated at what I could have even done if I took Lauren away. All these 6 men were my business competitors, and I could not let them mock me because of Lauren. I decided to leave them and continue what they were doing. I knew that I had to figure something out to embarrass all these men and teach Lauren a lesson. I walked out of the villa towards my car and drove like a madman, unable to digest everything that I saw. I gave Lauren everything that she ever asked for and even more. I was great in bed and we had a lot of wild nights and even days. I did not understand what Lauren was missing, that she had to go to such extreme levels just to have some fun. Anyway, thinking about why Lauren did all of this would not serve me any purpose. All I could think of right now was how to get back at Lauren and those men who were having a wild time with my wife. My mind was consumed with anger and betrayal, fueling a burning desire for revenge. I needed to devise a plan that would make them pay for their actions and restore my sense of justice. As the rage within me grew, I vowed to make sure they paid for messing with me. Lauren came home the next evening just like she had told me. I was waiting for her at home to see how she would behave after everything that she did since last night. She acted pretty calm and composed for someone who cheated on her husband with not just one, but 6 men. I tried to play along and ask her how the sleepover was. She told me that it was fun and she did a lot of catching up with her friends. I waited for her to freshen up so that I could implement my revenge. After Lauren came and sat beside me, I told her that I am planning to take a 2-week business trip for which I would need a personal secretary and that I had hired someone and her name was Catherine. I told her that she would be taking care of me in those 2 weeks. I called for her in the living room to introduce Lauren to Catherine. Lauren greeted her and welcomed her on board. I asked Lauren to rest up as I needed to discuss a few things with Catherine. She said that she was very tired, which of course she would be, after having sex with all the 6 men. That sure would have been tiring. Lauren did not look very pleased that I was taking such personal interest in Catherine, but she had no choice but to agree to it. I started walking with Catherine in the opposite direction, placing my hand on her butt and made sure that Lauren noticed it. I spent about 1 hour with Catherine explaining what her role would be. She was hired for the sole purpose to annoy Lauren and to get doubts in her mind about my relationship with Catherine. I wanted Lauren to confess on her own about her wild activities that she had been engaging in behind my back. Catherine walked into our bedroom the next morning to wake me up so that we are not late for our meeting. Lauren was shocked that Catherine had access to our bedroom as well. I quickly got ready, and before Lauren could question anything, I told her that I will see her after 2 weeks. Catherine and I left home, and for the next 2 weeks I would be staying at a hotel and keeping an eye on Lauren and her activities. I also had to find out detailed information on all the men that were at the party. I made sure to gather as much proof of actions as possible to make sure that I cover all bases and use them at the right moment. During my stay at the hotel, I meticulously documented any suspicious interactions or behavior from Lauren, as well as any potential connections she may have had with the men from the party. Additionally, I discreetly collected business and personal information of all the 6 men, as they could not just get away with goofing around with my wife. I hired a personal investigator to look into all the men and give me reports of their personal as well as professional relationships. Lauren was a special case, so I decided to spy on her myself. I wanted to see what she would do in these 2 weeks when I wasn't around. I was waiting for her to leave the house, as I know that she wouldn't be stupid to call any of her lovers to our home. She left home at noon. I followed her car to see who she would be meeting. She parked at a hotel and met Matt Ryan, who was my biggest competitor. They had lunch and were laughing and smiling at each other. I could see Ryan's hand on Lauren's thigh from time to time. She did not even try to make an effort to push his hand away. After lunch, Ryan guided her to his car and took her to his villa. I knew what they would be doing in the villa, so I did not want to waste my time following them anymore. My private investigator had sent me a few details about Matt Ryan. I was able to get Matt's fiance's contact details. I went to a phone booth and called her. I told her that Matt had been planning a surprise for her and that she was to meet him at this address. I gave her the address and waited for her to show up. She showed up after 40 minutes and drove straight inside. I had already bribed the security guards and they let her in. The main door was unlocked as there was no reason for them to lock it. Matt's fiancée went inside hoping for a surprise and hadn't expected the shock that was in store for her. She saw Matt all over a woman she did not recognize in a compromising state. She screamed at Matt and threw the engagement ring at his face and started walking furiously out of the villa. Matt followed behind her, telling her that she was mistaken, but she trusted what she saw. She told him that she would not only be breaking the engagement, but also withdrawing all her investments in his business. I was sitting in my car enjoying the scene in front of my eyes. I told myself 1 down, 5 more to go. In the same way, I got the information on all the other men and collected proof of their infidelity to their wives or made sure they were caught red-handed in the act. This led to most of them losing their investments or having to pay hefty alimony for cheating. I had one big surprise left for Lauren. I sent an invite to all the men from Lauren to a party at a new venue so that she could cheer them all up in this difficult time. Additionally, I also sent an invite to Lauren from all the men telling that she was the only woman who understood them and never judged them. This party was to celebrate the bond that all of them shared with her. I made sure that the villa was ready with all the preparations before the party started. Everyone arrived on time for the party. I made sure that everyone deposited their phones at the entrance before they could enter the villa. This was part of my plan so that they were cut off from the outside world. Lauren walked in wearing a sexy red backless dress that I had gifted her. I was amused at her shamelessness to even wear something that I had given her to enjoy herself with other men without even an inch of guilt. I had installed cameras everywhere in the villa, including the bathrooms, as I did not want to miss any kind of action. The party started with music and drinking. They slowly started dancing and kissing each other. As the party went on, I opened the link to the live stream of this party to all of the companies involved. The live stream started playing on every TV screen in both my company and everyone else's companies who were invited to the party. I had taken all their phones and placed them beside me in the monitor room. As the party progressed, their phones started ringing, some from their managers and some from their families and friends, to let them know that they were on a live stream and were being filmed. I put everyone's phones on silent and enjoyed the show with a bucket of popcorn. In the 2 weeks that I had been following Lauren, one thing that I understood was that she never loved me. She was only with me for the money and the privileges that she would receive as my wife. I should have known better not to fall for someone like her who was nothing but a gold digger. To be honest, I would not have had a problem with it because I understand that people get attracted to money. That was still okay. But what I was not okay with was that she tried to fool me by acting as a loyal wife. And she was not only having an affair, but she was having an affair with people I would have to deal with every now and then. I could see the looks on their faces when they would come to talk to me about a certain deal and make me feel inferior because in their hearts they knew that they were having the best time of their lives with my wife. That was something I was not okay with. I knew I was doing the right thing by exposing not just Lauren, but also sending a message to all those men that they made a really poor choice by messing with me. I collected the entire footage from the party and left. I left a message for Lauren and told her that I would be arriving tomorrow. The cameras were still recording them sleeping together in one bed, naked and on top of each other. A few of the men even got up in the morning and left. Lauren was the last one to leave. She looked at the message on her phone and quickly made her exit to reach home. I gave her enough time to get home, freshen up, and prepare for my arrival. After I thought that she would be ready, I made my entrance along with Catherine on my side. I hugged Lauren when I saw her and then started talking to Catherine. I acted as if Lauren was non-existent as I completely ignored her. Lauren stood there for a while, and when she saw that there was no response from me, she stomped her foot and left. I could see that my revenge plan was working. It has been 2 days since I came back from my business trip, and I have been trying to avoid Lauren as much as possible. I knew that all her lovers were busy with court cases and defamation cases against them, and could not contact her anytime soon. Lauren was still unaware of the footage and the chaos it created, as I had blocked all of them from her contacts. As days went by, I made sure that Lauren felt ignored and unwelcome in her own house. Catherine was the one calling the shots regarding everything around the house. She was the one letting the cook know what to make for breakfast, and also what kind of diet that I would be following. When Lauren tried to correct her, she would just smile and tell Lauren that I have now changed my preferences and am willing to chuck out old habits and give her a snarky look. Lauren came to me complaining that Catherine has been overtaking everything in the house and having a say in things that she was not appointed for. I told her to stop overreacting to everything. Catherine was much better at organizing all this and was doing a much better job. However, Lauren still felt frustrated because she believed that Catherine's involvement was unnecessary and intrusive. I wanted her to blame me for cheating on her so that I could play the reverse on her. I told Lauren the next day that I wanted her to spend some time with her friends, so I had booked a club where she could take her friends along to have some fun. I knew that she had been feeling a little out of place at home since the past few days. I would be busy till late at night, so she could catch up with her friends and come home after entertaining herself. This would help her lift her spirits as well. I was still having someone tail her and give me reports of her whereabouts every hour. There was no way I was going to trust her ever. I needed her out of the house so that I could prepare everything for a fun ride that she would be in for tonight. Little did she know, tonight would be a night she would never forget. As I meticulously planned every detail, excitement grew within me, eager to see her reaction to the surprise I had in store. Lauren came home around midnight fully drunk. As she walked into the living room, she noticed me sitting on the couch with Catherine on my lap. She could hardly make sense of what was happening. She walked towards us and screamed, "What the hell is going on?" I looked at her, smiled, and asked her to join me. She looked at us disgusted and asked Catherine to get off my lap. As Catherine was about to get off, I told her to sit back. Lauren was fuming with anger. She said that she knew that there was something going on between the two of us. Right from the day Catherine walked in, she knew that she was not just my personal assistant. I smiled at her audacity to blame me for cheating on her when she was the one doing exactly the same thing. I asked Catherine to leave us alone and walked towards the home theater. Lauren walked behind me with great difficulty, making sure not to trip, and stood beside me. I switched on the TV and something raunchy started playing on it. She did not understand what it was, but as she kept looking at the screen, she understood what I had put up on screen. The color drained from her face when she realized that it was the footage from her night with all the men. She looked at me in disbelief as she did not know what to say. She just kept staring at the screen and finally asked me where I got it from. I laughed at her question. I was amused that she did not even try to defend herself. I replied very casually that I recorded it myself. Her eyes widened in shock as she processed my response. She stuttered, trying to find the right words to explain herself, but nothing came out. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as the weight of her actions hung in the air. I could see the guilt and regret written all over her face. It was clear that she had been caught red-handed and was at a loss for words. She was now struggling to come to terms with being caught in the act. I sat on the couch and started watching the footage with so much enthusiasm. She was just looking at the screen and at me, back and forth for a while, as she did not know if I was angry or amused by what was going on. I started commenting on what I saw on the screen. I told Lauren that I really liked what she did with one of the guys. It was a skill about her that I loved. I motioned her to sit beside me so that we could go about the entire footage together. She had no choice, so she sat beside me and started watching it with her head bowed down in shame. She knew at this point that she had messed up big time. As the footage played, I couldn't help but notice the discomfort on Lauren's face. It was clear that she regretted her actions and was aware of the consequences she would face. I made her sit through 2 hours of footage and told her that it was entertaining. I never knew she had such close friends who were so comfortable in their own skin around her. She had nothing to say in her defense. She started very meekly with a sorry. She told me that she got carried away by all these men. She said that they talked her into a challenge of spending a night with them. She couldn't let a few men win against her, and that was the reason she went to the party. I really liked how she was so fast at making up this story. I nodded, letting her think that I was buying her story. I tried to play a little with her to see how good she was at making up shit. I told her that I understand that she was being cornered by these men, but she could have used the identity of being my wife to get out of the situation. She said that she did not want to ruin my reputation, and hence did not mention who she was. I was impressed by her story-making skills. The ease with which she was lying was unbelievable. I acted as if I felt sorry for her being the victim in all of this. Just as she thought that it was over and I bought her story, I made her walk to the dining table to give her a glass of water. I made her sit on a chair and place the glass on a piece of paper. She picked the glass and noticed the paper. It was the same invite that she had hid under the dresser. The glass fell from her hand and shattered. She knew in that instant that there was no use making up stories, as I knew everything that she had been doing all this while. She fell to the ground and started crying profusely. Tears were the only thing that could save her. There was nothing else that she had to say. She could not defend herself, as there was nothing I did that could have led her to take such drastic steps. After confronting her and making her admit to everything she had done, I kicked her out of the house, as I had no room for a cheater like her, both in my heart and in my house. She kept begging me to give her another chance, but I learned from my mistakes and don't repeat them ever. She said that she was not thinking straight and got carried away. All of them were rich and she could not say no to them. I firmly stood my ground, knowing that forgiveness was not an option. It was a painful decision, but I knew it was necessary for my own well-being and self-respect. Moving forward, I vowed that if I ever were to like another person, then I would definitely test her worthiness to be a part of my life. This was the biggest lesson I learned from Lauren's betrayal. Within a week, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I made sure that she gets nothing from me after all the chaos she caused in my life. I made sure that a few pictures and videos of her cheating were circulated in the media to name and shame her. I made sure that I destroy any credibility that she had so that it would be difficult for her to get a job anywhere. I had warned all the major companies against hiring her. I still had a private investigator tailing her so that I was aware of what she was up to. I wanted to let her know how difficult life would be without me in the picture. I wanted her to regret every day of her life going forward for cheating on me. I made sure that she does not get a place to stay easily and is insulted everywhere she goes asking for a job. She did not agree for a mutual divorce and demanded alimony. I could not hold back my laughter at her blatant demands of money and property. She even faked to be pregnant to make sure that she gets at least child support and property under the child's name. I showed the judge all the pictures in which she was surrounded by so many men in all kinds of compromising positions. I told the judge that I was never that intimate with her to blindly agree to the child being mine. I asked to get a DNA test to make sure that it was actually mine. As they took her for the test, they came to know that she lied about the pregnancy. I put a defamation case on her along with the divorce case. She pleaded to the judge that she had no money and no source of income to pay me. Well, she should have thought about all of this before she decided to cheat on me. This was all the drama that had happened to me in the last 3 months since I got married. I am writing all of this just to lessen the hurt and pain that I have been feeling. It was very difficult for me to stay on this path of revenge and make sure to carry on with it till the end. There were times when I was so depressed that I didn't even want to do anything. Lauren was the first person who I thought would be different from all the other girls that I met in the past. She did not come off as a gold digger at first, but all she wanted was my money and property. I now understand her reluctance from the beginning to share a room with me. She would not have been able to hide all her dirty actions if we were living in the same room. It was a painful realization, but I'm grateful that I discovered her true intentions before things got even more complicated. I could literally relate with the saying, "Love is blind." For me, it was both blind and untrustworthy. I know it is going to be a difficult walk for me starting here. She not only ruined my marriage, but also my reputation. I can see the way people look at me as I walk past them. There is pity in their eyes, and some even have a mocking expression that I got fooled by a woman who was cheating right under my nose. It's disheartening to witness the judgment and scrutiny from those around me. The weight of betrayal is heavy, and it's challenging to navigate through the aftermath of such a devastating revelation. I would like suggestions and opinions from all of you guys to let me know if you agree with everything that I have done, and also how I should live my life going forward. All this drama has impacted my judgment in such a way that I keep second-guessing myself all the time. I would appreciate any help that comes my way. Thank you for reading.
A simple suggestion led to my husband divorcing me. I didn't end up doing what I was thinking, but I had to pay for it. Maybe I should have given it a deep thought before telling him, and now am being served divorce papers. I never thought that suggesting to open our marriage would not sit well with my husband. I thought he also had the same idea, but I never knew we were far apart. My name is Jessica. I am a 26-year-old fashion designer. The name of my husband is Fred, and he is a 29-year-old banker. My husband and I have been together for 3 years now. My husband and I met at a family function that my mother hosted. I was invited to attend that function since I designed most of the dresses worn by the ladies. I loved my work, and my mother was very proud of me. I didn't exactly like going to those kinds of parties because my mother was always trying to match me with somebody. On that faithful day, I met my husband Fred, talking to my mother, and like every other day, I didn't even look his way. I quickly spoke to my mother and left before she could introduce us. On my way running out of the event at some point, I ran into Gabrielle. Gabrielle was such a lovely woman. I met her through my mother, and I had made some dresses for her. She was always very kind to me, and she supported my work. I respected Gabrielle a lot, and that was why I followed her when she pulled me back into the event. She kept on talking about how her grandson is sweet and all, and at some point I had to tune her out. I thought it was time for me to leave when she pulled me across the hall to where my mother was standing talking to a man. Gabrielle introduced him as his grandson Fred, and at that moment I was very much interested because Fred is a very handsome man. Fred and I got talking, and he told me about what he did for a living, and he complimented me about my work, which I was grateful for. Fred and I exchanged numbers, and from there we started speaking. At that point, I did want to be in a relationship because I had just left one which was not very good. Fred had assured me he was not like every other guy, and I believed him. Fred took me out on dates, which I was very happy with. He was very attentive to me, and I loved that. Things were going smoothly, and at some point Fred asked me to be his girlfriend, and I accepted. I was skeptical about it because I genuinely loved Fred, and I knew he loved me too. While we dated, I discovered that Fred had lost his mother at a very early age, and he was raised by his grandmother, Gabrielle. I got to meet his whole family. His grandmother, who he adored so much, was his everything, and she approved of our relationship. Few months later, Fred and I got married in a very beautiful way. I could say that I was totally in love. We bought a house together and we moved in together. Our marriage was beautiful at some point, and we were the ideal couple. We went out on regular dates, went on vacations, attended so many functions and parties together. Our lives were moving perfectly and felt surreal. Of course, we had different arguments from time to time, but we always found our way back to each other. We didn't really stay mad at each other for long and had our ways of settling each argument. A year into our marriage, things began to change. I started traveling a lot for my work, and I didn't have time. Fred also got promoted, and most times he was not at home. It was as if everything was not in our favor. Whenever I had time to spare before a trip, Fred could be in another state, but we made sure to find time, even if it was an hour in those days, to spend together. It got worse at some point that we didn't see each other for over 6 months. Sure, we talked on the phone and made video calls, but it was different. I was busy creating my designs one day when Gabrielle worked into my office like every other day. I thought it was going to be a very good afternoon with her talking about random things, but it wasn't. I felt like everything started from there. She scolded me about not being present in my marriage and how I was neglecting my house and all. I decided to make her understand that I wasn't neglecting my duties as a wife and that Fred has been busy with work. And she told me that Fred had complained to her that I am no longer available at home and that work had taken most of my time. I was shocked to hear that because it was Fred, who I had not seen in a couple of weeks. I knew we went 6 months without seeing each other, but after that, I decided it was not going to happen again, and I hired more people to work for me in order for me to spend more time with my husband. And so, when Gabrielle was talking to me about what Fred had said, I was disappointed. I made Gabrielle understand what was going on, but she didn't want to see things from my own perspective. I understood how much she meant to Fred, and that's why I decided to let her go on and on about what she didn't really understand. When Gabrielle left, I was so angry because I felt like if by chance Fred and I had issues in our relationship, he shouldn't talk to his grandmother first, but to me, his wife, in order for us to solve the problem. After a few days, Fred returned from his trip, and I decided to talk to him about his grandmother's visit, to which he apologized, and said at that time he didn't know what to do. And we hadn't seen each other for 6 months, and he needed to speak to someone. I understood what he meant, and we decided to resolve our issues and cut back the hours we were working in order for us to have enough time for each other. Fred began to work less, and I also did the same. We started coming back home to each other early. I started cooking dinners for us, we hung out with friends, and it was as if we started dating again. During the next couple of months, we celebrated Fred's birthday. It was celebrated in grand style. I trusted Gabrielle to take such things to the next level. We also invited friends and colleagues. It was indeed beautiful. A year later, and we were back to where things were. We were working more now, and we saw each other. We could only meet during Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners, and at that point I felt like we were drifting apart. I hardly saw Fred, which I was not happy about. At some point, I started thinking that maybe he was seeing someone else. I didn't want to think too much into it, and I decided to take my mind off things. I was busy with work when my mother came to visit me. She complained about not seeing me in months, and I had to explain to her that I had been occupied. She had asked about Fred, to which I explained things to her. My mother was a typical housewife who didn't understand the need for a woman to work if her husband was providing for her. That's why she was always responsible for putting together events for my father when he was alive, and that had been her thing today. But I didn't want to be a mere housewife who was responsible for taking care of events. I wanted to make a name for myself. I knew she was not going to understand, so I let it be. Apart from me being in love with Fred at that moment, she contributed to me marrying Fred. She kept going on and on about how I was too successful, and I should be grateful I saw a man who was willing to marry me. I knew she meant well, but that wasn't me. I had always wanted to work for my own money. My mother left my store, and I received a call from Gabrielle saying she would like to see me and my husband Fred in 2 days' time, and that it was very urgent. I didn't know what was going on, and so I said I should call Fred. I called him, but it went straight to voicemail. I knew he had been avoiding my calls, but I thought I had given him some heads up concerning what his grandmother had said. I wondered what she could possibly have to tell us. I hoped she was not sick because she meant a lot to Fred and that could break him. I thought to myself, and I didn't know what to do when it was time to go see Gabrielle because I still haven't got hold of Fred. I decided to go there and explain things to her. But on getting there, I saw Fred talking and laughing with his grandmother. I was very shocked. Fred came back and didn't think to return my calls or even come back home. And to make matters worse, he was behaving like we were not having issues in front of his grandmother. That threw me off balance. He was portraying a happy family in front of his grandmother, and we didn't see each other for weeks. I decided to have a talk with him when we were left alone, and he had told me that he didn't want to disappoint his grandmother and that I should play along. I asked him why he ignored my calls and decided not to answer me. I felt at that point Fred had changed. He was not the person I married. I knew we had been busy and all, but that can't possibly drive a rift between us, right? Gabrielle returned, and she sat down and we began talking. Immediately I asked if she was sick, but she responded she wasn't. The reason she called us was because Fred and I had been married for 3 years now without children. I felt taken back. I looked at Fred and he looked indifferent. Before I could understand what was going on, Gabrielle started crying, saying she was getting old and she needed to see her grandchildren before she died. I was about to explain to her that it cannot be possible right now when Fred interrupted me and said we could give her what she wants. At that moment, I felt like crying because my husband was not listening to me, and he was promising Gabrielle something we should have discussed as a couple instead of him taking the decision on his own. I looked at Gabrielle and she was very happy. I wanted to speak with Fred, but he left saying he needed to attend to something. Few hours later, I left Gabrielle's house. While I was on my way home, I thought about everything, and I was very sad. I got home and I saw that Fred was at home. I decided to confront him about what had happened, but he said he was going to make his grandmother happy, whether I liked it or not, and I tried to explain to him that we can't bring a child into our midst because we barely had time for ourselves, and that a child could complicate things. I told him that we should really explain things to Gabrielle, to which he bluntly refused. Fred seemed not to listen to me at that moment. All he cared about was how to grant his grandmother wishes and also to make her happy. I'm not against birthing a child, not at all. I just didn't want my child to lack attention from us. And also, I didn't want my child to be left in the hands of a nanny. The fact that Fred didn't understand me at that moment made me very upset, and we ended up in a heated argument. He didn't see things from my own perspective, and I think I also didn't understand where he was coming from. Yes, every couple would literally want to have a child, but in our case, we barely had time for each other, and so bringing in a child at that time was a very bad idea. Truly, I wasn't ready to quit my job, and so also Fred wasn't ready either. I didn't have a problem working, but I have a problem staying at home doing nothing. I didn't want to be a full-time housewife that would always stay at home watching TV and doing house chores. I'm not trying to condemn those that are full-time housewives. Honestly, it is not a bad thing to be a full-time housewife, but that life is not for me. I love my career with passion, and I like putting a smile on my clients' faces. I wanted to also put a smile on Gabriella and my family. But it seemed like I wasn't doing enough, because I literally did try to make them happy, most especially Gabriella. Weeks went by, and Gabriella constantly reminded us about wanting to see her grandchildren. And so one day, I called my husband and told him that we really need to settle this issue of having a child. Of course, he didn't feel the heat like I had felt back then because everyone thought I was the problem. Fried was guilty. In fact, we both were guilty, but he made it look as if I was the problem. So Fred and I talked on the phone, and I asked him if he would be home the coming weekend so we could patch things out. He told me to give him about 30 minutes so that he could get back to me and that he was in a meeting. I agreed, and we ended the call. After getting off the phone with my husband, I picked my bag and headed home. It was time for me to close for the day, so I went home and hoped that my husband would keep to his promise and return the call. I arrived home and met an empty house as usual. I had my shower and changed into my pajamas. I was about heading to the kitchen to fix something for dinner when my husband called. He apologized for not keeping to the time. We asked ourselves how our day went, and I asked about the meeting he had that day, if everything went okay, and he responded positively. I asked him if he could come back that weekend so we could talk things out, most especially the child aspect. And he assured me that he was going to come. We talked about a few things on the phone before we ended the call. I went ahead and had my dinner and watched my regular TV night shows before I retired to bed for the night. World Cup the next day very early and headed home. Apparently, one of my good clients had booked to be styled for a photo shoot, so I left home before 5 a.m. I went to the client house with my crew members and all the equipment we needed to carry out our job. It was a birthday photo shoot, and we needed to deliver effectively. At the photo shoot, I met my old schoolmate, Becca. I was a year older than Becca, and also a year ahead of her when we were in college. It was a mutual friendship, and Becca seemed calm back then in school. I asked her what she was doing in the studio, and she said the lady I was styling at that moment was her cousin's sister. She just came around to her cousin's sister with a couple of things. She also told me that she had no idea that I was the stylist that always styled her cousin. She complimented on my style of fashion and hoped to be like me someday. I felt so happy, and at that moment I was very proud of myself for being able to put this through all by myself. It was a proud moment for me, guys. LOL. Becca and I chatted for a long time while I left my crew members to work. I usually left my clients with my crew members because I also wanted them to learn. And so, I gave them a chance to represent me, which they often deliver effectively. Becca and I talked a lot about school, businesses, and personal life. I really enjoyed conversing with Becca. I was so engrossed in the conversation that I literally forgot what I came there to do at first. I also showed her the work I had done and a few other things. And so, guys, I really had a nice time with Becca. 30 minutes later, we all were set to leave and bade ourselves farewell. Becca and exchanged contacts and got in touch with each other. I and my crew members headed straight to the store and continued our daily routine. It was at that time my phone rang, and it was my husband calling. He called to tell me that he would be coming back home the next day. I got off the phone and continued with what I was doing. So guys, the next morning, I didn't go to work because it was on a Saturday. I don't normally work on weekends because I decided to limit my workload. That day, my husband was expected to come back home, and so I waited for him. Few hours later, Fred arrived home, and I welcomed him as usual. I wanted him to have a rest before telling him what I had in mind. He went and freshened up, and a few minutes later, he came down to have lunch. I went to the sitting room to continue watching my movie. Fred later came over to where I was seated and asked me what was so important that I had to call him over to discuss. He told me he was curious to know, and he paid attention to me. At that moment, I didn't know how to put it out to him because I'd gotten so furious. Somehow I mustered the courage and told him we should open up our marriage since we barely see each other or spend time together. We would still be a couple, and our families don't need to know about it. I also told him I wasn't ready to have a child just yet because we both don't have time, and I wasn't ready to be a full-time mom. I wanted to concentrate more on my career until I was ready. Immediately I said that. Fred yelled at me and almost gave me a slap. He was shocked and at the same time looked at me in utmost disgust. I saw through his eyes that he was really disappointed in me. Fred left my side and went inside the room. In that state of anger, Fred broke a lot of valuables and even broke our wedding pictures. I tried to calm him down, but he didn't listen. I ran out of the house because I didn't want Fred to harm me. So guys, I told Fred about my suggestion and he got really mad. I haven't seen Fred that mad ever since we were together. Maybe I woke up the beast in him. Update. Hi guys, I have gone through all of you guys' comments and I really appreciate it. I have also seen the hateful comments and truly, I deserve all of that. Let me get straight to the point. So guys, I ran out of the house in fear because I had never seen my husband that mad before. I went to my mom's house to explain what had happened. Honestly, she was really disappointed in me. I explained to her about how Fred and I weren't that couple we always portrayed whenever we were in the family gathering. At that point, she didn't stop reminding me of how she was irritated by my own foolish suggestion. The following day, I got a call from Gabrielle. At that point, I already knew that my husband had already told her about it. I couldn't pick the phone because I was very ashamed of myself. I got up that morning with swollen eyes. Apparently, I had cried all through the night after thinking about what I had suggested to my husband. I thought he also wanted to open it up since things were not like before. So I didn't pick the call and didn't return it back either. It had been 10 hours since I had left home, and my husband didn't call me. He switched his lines so I wouldn't be able to reach out to him. Just when I was about to leave the bed, I got a knock on my door. I didn't answer, and after a while, the person opened the door and came in. It was my mom. She sat down on the bed and told me Fred had sent something for me. I got up in the hope that maybe he wanted to see me. I got curious as to why he had to send me a package. I opened it and found out that it was divorce papers. I couldn't believe my eyes. My mom hugged me and patted me to stop crying. The divorce papers were already signed by Fred. I was left to sign it. My husband knew I would come see him after seeing the divorce papers, and so he traveled out of town that very day. He instructed our family lawyer to come back the next day to collect the papers after I had signed it. So, 2 days later after Fred left town, I signed the divorce papers and handed it over to the lawyer. It was a tough decision, but I had to make it because there was nothing I could do to change his mind. Update. Guys, it has already been months since my husband and I both went our separate ways. I moved out of my mom's house and managed to get a place to stay. I didn't want to go back and start staying with her. I wanted to be independent and have my own place. Fred moved on, and he never spoke to me since the last time I ran out of the house. I also have moved on with my life. I want to try and put my life together and also try out new things. Most times, I usually go to my store and get myself busy so as to make me forget all that has happened in the last few months. Gabrielle never called back ever since I ignored her call. I know I must have really hurt her, but I guess she wouldn't want to see my face again. So guys, this is my story. I hope you all have learned something from this. I hope none of you would make the same mistake I made. I should have never told my husband that. I guess this was a lesson well learnt.